Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today, the Resource Management Lifecycle, Effective Planning for Maximum Utilization. We have a few quick logistics that we want to cover before we get started. First off, we are expecting a large audience today, so we'll not be able to open the line for questions. However, we do have a webinar facilitator who's going to be monitoring the presentation, and she can answer any questions you might have via the chat module in your GoToWebinar tools. You can also feel free to either reply to the webinar emails you've been receiving via GoToWebinar, or you can send me an email directly, and I'm happy to answer your questions as well. You can see my contact information at the bottom of the slide. That being said, all lines will be muted throughout the presentation. If for some reason you get distracted or pulled away, no worries there. We will be distributing the recording after it concludes later on this afternoon. And finally, for those of you who need PDU information, we'll be giving you that information as well. At the end of the presentation, you'll see the number up on your screen. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. For today's agenda, we'll be covering the following topics. First and foremost, what is resource management and who is involved with resource management? Once we cover the basics of resource management, we'll move on to the resource management lifecycle and then drill into the 5 levels within it. And lastly, we'll touch on some effective resource management tools that you can leverage to improve resource management discipline, aligned to the resource management lifecycle, and of course maximize resource utilization so that you can get more done within your organization. And with that, we'll drill into the details. Before we get into the various levels of resource management, let's touch on the basics. What is resource management? So I threw up on the screen the Wikipedia definition, the efficient and effective deployment of an organization's resources when they are needed. The term resources does not always refer to human resources, but yet all resources that need to be considered when scheduling a project activity, so keep that in mind. For the purpose of this webinar, though, we are going to focus on human resources for the resource management lifecycle and, of course, the 5 levels. Unlike some project management processes, in order to complete the resource management lifecycle, most resources that work on projects, they're all going to play a role. Each part of the life cycle could be owned by a different stakeholder, and of course that will vary from organization to organization. Executive management will play a role in identifying and selecting the right work and projects for the organization to execute, more on the portfolio management level. In many cases, executive management will only be involved in resource management from a reporting and analytics standpoint. For example, which projects and work to include in the business portfolio based on resource management metrics and data. In many organizations, the PMO will be in charge of inputting resource data into the resource management tools that you use. The PMO will play a key role in the first 2 steps in the resource management lifecycle, including planning the resource roles and identifying the right resources to fill those roles. The project manager will be involved primarily within the execution rather than the early stages of planning, so resource planning, portfolio management planning, etc. Once the resources are assigned, the project manager will be accountable for the resource performance. The project team's role is to collaborate with each other to foster a positive team environment, to share knowledge. Shared knowledge and expertise will be critical when delivering your projects successfully. So we want to make sure that you give them the right tools to collaborate and knowledge share. And then, of course, the team member's job is to execute on that work and get that work completed. So let's take a look at the full resource management lifecycle. As you can see in the graphic on the screen, this is a top-down approach to managing resources. To truly accomplish full resource management within your organization, all areas must be considered and accommodated. So that means all levels of this life cycle. That being said, it's always wise to consider where your organization is maturity-wise as it relates to resource management to ensure that you're adopting the right amount of discipline and functionality at the right pace. Obviously, if you introduce too much too soon, you can introduce unnecessary risk, and we don't want that to happen. By the way, it's very common for users within an organization to be at various levels of maturity. One of the most important aspects of implementing and even executing a new tool or discipline is that you have to know your audience and where they reside in that maturity model so that you can, and even current processes, to make sure that any technology that's introduced will be easily adopted. So let's drill into each level. Capacity planning helps to ensure that resource capacity meets current and future business requirements in a cost-effective manner. In the capacity planning stage, you'll need to identify all the roles needed for the given project or even any other work that you may have in the organization at hand. So for example, which organizations or departments will be involved in your project. This will not only help you establish the structure for your project, but potentially establish how your tasks will be organized and even identify potential security constraints. What disciplines and skill sets are required to complete your project? Without the proper skill sets and expertise, particular tasks may require more training, even longer turn times, and of course possibly rework. So we want to make sure we understand those. Effective resource management relies on the fact that these factors have all been considered prior to selecting your resources. So once you've determined your generic roles, you'll need to determine the quantity of each role as well as the time frame as to when they're needed. As you obtain this information, you'll then be ready to analyze your plan, make adjustments to the plan, and always prepare for the actual named assignments. Now it's time to assign your project team. Before we do, though, we must look at all the factors that are involved in the process. Who's available and when? What expertise do the resources possess? Have they worked on a similar project in the past? And if they did, how well did they perform with that work effort? Are they interested in working on the defined project? And finally, how much will it cost to obtain those resources for the project? In addition to the environmental factors, a roles and responsibility document could be very helpful in this process. An organization chart could also aid in this process. In many cases, the project team members are known in advance. In other instances, you may need to be prepared to enter a negotiation process with either functional managers or maybe even other project managers, as the resources could be working on other projects or other work in the organization. In this case, project priorities and benefits may be weighed to determine which project will bring the greater value to the organization as far as which one will actually be able to obtain the resource. In many cases, if project teams are already over-allocated, there may be a need to consider acquiring resources from even a third-party vendor or consulting firm. You may also consider whether or not having a virtual team will be adequate for your resource management needs. After resources are assigned and confirmed, you'll then need to be prepared to manage all future changes that could potentially come into play, making sure that your resource plan is flexible and scalable to handle any of those unexpected shifts that we all know happen during the resource management life cycle. So resource work management. This is an ongoing process in the resource management life cycle. It begins with allocation, and then it ends at the completion of the final project or work deliverable. So it's going on throughout the entire project. This stage in the life cycle is typically managed by the project manager, and again, these stages may vary from organization to organization as far as which stakeholders are involved and who's actually managing your resources, whether it's the project manager or maybe even the functional manager. This process includes managing all the assignments, tracking team member performance, providing project feedback, and of course status. resolving issues and risk, and coordinating changes to enhance the project performance. All of these tools necessary for project execution and management are also essential to your resources. As with any work or project deliverable, time, resources, cost, they all must be considered together in order to effectively deliver a project. Resource collaboration is a key practice in the way we work today. And of course, there's new ways of collaborating. We've got the social platform as well as the traditional project management collaboration that we're all used to. Working together on work deliverables allows us to streamline our work, deliver services, increase overall productivity, which are all key. It's simple math really, right? More experienced resources working together equals less time. Resource collaboration is a critical stage in resource management. If your resources aren't communicating and they aren't working towards a shared understanding of goals, carefully putting together a resource plan pre-execution may be less productive. Resources must communicate in order to keep projects and work on track. So make sure, again, key point that they have the proper tools to do so. When defining the tools to implement for resource management, make sure you consider the ease of use and flexibility to ensure high user adoption and effective collaboration. On to the last level of the resource management lifecycle, which focuses on those that are actually accountable for the individual work items. We all have project work or various work items that we must complete, and most likely we all have personal to-do lists as well. I know we want to think that all of our workers are strictly working on project work and work for the business, but you know, today we all have a combined list. We all have things we have to get done. In order to be the most productive, resources need a tool that will handle all of their work tasks and all of their personal tasks, and whether the work tasks are project related or non-project related, they have to have it all in one location. They must be able to gather their work, update their work, monitor all their related work, and even dependencies in one system. So that's key, and we're going to get into that in just a moment. So now that we've covered the discipline of resource management and the various levels within the life cycle, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Matthew Willey to discuss various tools that can be leveraged to help you effectively implement the resource management life cycle within your organization. The tools that are going to be covered will include the resource planner, the resource analyzer, the resource grid, full resource negotiations, the assignment planner, and resource reports. This is only a subset of resource management tools. There's many more out there, but this will give you an idea of the tools that you can use to align with the cycle that we just discussed. So with that, Matt, it is all yours.
Thank you, Heather. I'm just going to go ahead and start showing my screen here, and then we'll start looking at the tools. So the way we're going to go through this is I'm going to try to run through the process fairly similar to how Heather just explained it. And we'll be really filling two roles here, though, so keep in mind that I'm two people right now. I'm a project manager, and then at some point we'll switch to be more of a resource manager role, and there's kind of a negotiation and a back and forth between those two roles. This isn't required. All the features here can be used really however you want, as we know that different businesses have different processes and different practices, and that's perfectly fine. I'm just going to go through more of a general use case, kind of the best practice use case for using our system. So I'm here and I'm in the projects community, and right now I'm taking on a project manager role. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my projects tab here, and that's going to load up a list of all of our projects. So what we're doing right now is we're going to launch a tool called the Resource Planner, and the Resource Planner really allows you to build a plan. So my project is still in a proposed state. It hasn't even been approved yet, so we're not ready to start planning it, you know, as far as all the tasks and those types of things. Really, we just want to see, do we have the resources to do this, and how much resources do I think it's going to take to do this project? So I created a project here called Large Project. And I just highlight my project and I hit Edit Resource Plan, and that's going to open up our resource planner. So just to reiterate, this is all upfront planning before we even start the project. So what it does is it opens up our tool here. In the bottom grid, we can see all the different resources in our resource pool. And there's different views here. I can show all resources. If I just want to plan with generic resources to start with, if I don't know actually named resources that I'm going to be using, I can switch to my generic resources view here, and I'm just going to see things like business analysts, database resource developer, infrastructure project manager, so on and so forth. If I show all resources, I'm going to see not only my generic resources, but I'm also going to see my named resources like Adam and Alice and Alan, and then there are different departments and roles that they work in. So generally, you'll usually start with generic resources because you don't know exactly who's going to be working on your project yet, and you just want to kind of see how much work is going to need to be done. So I would come in here and say, okay, well, I know I'm going to need, say 2 developers. So I grab my developer here. I can just drag and drop it up to the top window, drop it on large project. And now I'd say in February I need 2 developers. In March maybe I need 2 as well. In April I need 2. In May, say I only need 1. And we're actually planning in hours right now, so that would be 2 hours. What you can actually do here is you can switch from hours to FTEs or FTE percent. So if you want to plan and say I need someone 50% of the time in February, you can choose FTE percent. If you want to say, I need 2 full-time people, then you can switch to the FTE view here, which is the one I like to use. And I'm going to go ahead and just say I need 2 FTEs, 2 FTEs, 2 FTEs, and 1 FTE. So now, I can go ahead and save this. And it tells me when I save, it says some rows are marked as private. Would you like to make them public? I'm going to go ahead and say no right now. If I say yes and I make them public, what that does is that's going to actually send a notification to the resource manager saying, hey, this person's requesting a resource. Go ahead and approve it and assign whoever the proper resource is. Since I'm still working on my plan, I'm not going to do that yet. So maybe I also need a project manager, so I'll go ahead and drag and drop my project manager onto here, and I'll say, in February I need 1, March I need 1, April I need 1, May I need 1. So then at that point, if I know which, if I'm ready and I think I know which named resources I want to use, I can do that as well, or I can let the resource manager do that, but I'll just show how that would work if I knew which resource I want. I'm going to go ahead and say show all resources. And when I go to the show all resources view, I'll see all of my resources again, but kind of a cool feature is you can click on, say, my developer row here, and I can hit the match button. And what that's actually going to do is it's going to search through all of my resources, find resources that are in the correct department, so the software development department, and that have the correct role, as well as who are the most available. And it's going to rate them. So on the side here, this one has a 79% match, and so on and so forth. So this looks like my best match here. This person is completely available currently in those months. That's what this is showing you here. If I scroll down, you'll see, for instance, this person is already in the red, so they already have too much work. So I would grab someone who's available and who's the right role. So I can say Alan looks like a good candidate. I can drag and drop onto my developer role here, and when I release, it asks me, what do you want to do? And so it's very intuitive in the fact that it presents you with questions. Do I want to fulfill this resource, or do I want to replace this resource? So what that actually does is if I hit replace, it's going to remove that developer row, and it's going to replace it with Alan, and it's going to give it all of the the FTEs there. So we wouldn't want to do that because we need 2 developers, not just 1, and so it would give 2 people's worth of work to 1 people if I hit replace 1 person. If I hit fulfill, which I'm going to do, what it'll do now is it'll put Alan under the developer row, and it'll automatically give him all of that the FTE work, right? But you can see now he's completely over-allocated in these 3 months because he's being asked to do the work of 2 people. So then I can look here and I can say, okay, well, David's also available. I can drag and drop onto Alan with David, and it's going to ask me, do I want to split or do I want to replace? So what I actually want to do is split. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you'll see then it splits the work up between those two people. So now neither one of them are over-allocated within any month. So you can quickly and easily come in here and build your resource plans out for a project. And it's really just saying, this is how many resources I think I'm going to need. This isn't assigning tasks to anyone. We're not even close to that yet. We're just saying, to the resource manager, I think I'm going to need this. If you don't have a resource manager role, if project managers are just really in charge of creating their own resource plans, and as long as people are available, then they're welcome to use them, that's perfectly fine as well. There doesn't have to be a negotiation back and forth or an approval. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and show that. So what I'll do now is I'll hit save, and it tells me once again some rows are private. Would you like to make them public? And I'm going to go ahead and say yes this time. So what that does is it puts a check mark on all of these resources that I'm requesting under the PM section here. So that stands for project manager. So the project manager has said, yes, I want these resources. I'm done with my plan here. But notice the RM one is not checked. So that's the resource manager tab. So they still have not approved that yet. And like I said, this isn't required. You can turn this feature off so that once a project manager puts it in, that's the way it is. So at this point then, you're going to get a notification. I'm going to close this. And I'm actually set as the resource manager here. So I get a notification saying Steve Masters has updated resource plans for resources that you manage. So you get a notification here. And from here, you can actually click on this link, and it's going to open up the resource planner, but now from a little bit different view. It's going to open this up now from a resource manager view. So think I'm a different person now. I'm no longer a project manager. I'm now a resource manager in the system. I get that notification. I come in, and it's saying, here's all of the resources that are being asked for the particular resources that were selected, right? So I can see here, for instance, under my large project, a project manager is being asked for. And I can then say, okay, a project manager is being asked for, who do I want to give them? So I can once again hit my match button. And then I would find my resources. But one thing I want to show is that I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. Going to go back. It opens up a separate window there. The other way that you can actually get into that is if I click on the Resources tab. So say I got the notification, but I wasn't quite ready to do it, right? Or I didn't want to just look at those particular resources. I want to look at all of my resources right now and just get them all out of the way. So what you can do is you can come in here, you can select all of your resources, and you can open up that resource planner right from here. Or maybe I'm just the resource planner for a particular department, so I can switch my view to my resources by department. And now I can say, okay, I'm in charge of the project office department. I'm going to go ahead and open up the resource planner for that entire department. So then it'll go out, it'll find all the data, it'll load it in, and this is the same tool, but we're looking at a little bit different of a view. The view before was by project, and then it would show you all of this. You can see in here that we're looking at resource requests for multiple projects. So there's this project here, there's this project here, so on and so forth. So I can see here's all those resources that I have not approved yet. They show up with no checkbox here. There's a question mark. And everybody else is good, so those are the only ones I have to worry about right now. So I'm going to say, okay, Alan, yeah, he's available. That's cool. I'm going to go ahead and hit accept. I can see David. Yep, that's great. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. They're asking for a project manager, but they didn't say who. So I'm going to go ahead and assign one, so I can highlight that row just like we did before, hit match. And I'm going to find my project manager. It looks like Eli is wide open here, so I'm going to grab Eli. I'm going to drag him onto project manager. And I'm just going to say replace because they were only asking for one FTE here. So now we're going to have two developers, and we're going to have Eli. I'm going to accept that. And then I'll save. And then that sends a notification back saying, hey, your resources have been approved. Your resource plan's good. And then, management or whoever reviews this to make, the rest of the project, the costs and the benefits and all of that to make the more portfolio decisions could then review the project knowing now that we have the resources to do this. While you do this, there's actually a history log here, so I can click on that. So I can see that at this time, this person proposed whatever proposal here for that particular resource. And then at this time, a commitment was agreed that, Eli Bowen would actually do that project manager work that was requested. So you have a nice running log of everything that's happened and when it's happened, so you can follow up and keep track of what's going on. Maybe you requested a resource 3 weeks ago. You have proof sitting there that that was done. What's going on, and you can keep track of that and make sure that you're on top of it. You can also, on any one of these resources requests, you can put notes. So maybe if they're asking for this one, you might send a note back to them saying, hey, that person we were thinking about using for another project, even though it's not showing in the system yet, can we use this person instead, or whatever it may be. So you can put notes in there, or notes for yourself just saying you're asking for this person because they have a specific skill set, or whatever it may be. So lots of different things that you can do within the tool here. I'm going to go ahead and close this. So then once you have your resource plan within the system, now the system knows this is how much resources we're expecting to use for this project. They're no longer available to be used for other projects. It's going to show now if I went to another project and I opened it up that those 2 people that I gave all that work to are no longer going to be available for other projects in that time period anyway. So the next thing you can do, once you have all of your resource plans, say we have 5 proposed projects or 10 proposed projects, and we want to go look at them all together, and maybe there's some over allocations in there, and we need to resolve those, and we need to figure out how we're going to resolve those. So what we can do is we can select some projects here. So I'm back to more of the project or a portfolio manager role at this point in time, not so much as a resource manager, although a resource manager can use this tool as well, and we'll show how that works too. But I can come in, I can select a bunch of projects here, and then I can hit Resource Analyzer is the next tool that we're going to look at. And the Resource Analyzer allows you to do a few things. One, it allows you to do some what-if modeling. One, it allows you can also compare, say, your budgets to your actuals. So if you're using our timesheet system later on when people actually start tracking time on the actual tasks that they get assigned to, you can compare those timesheet hours against the originally estimated amount of work that they were going to be doing on the project. So lots of different analysis that you can do in here. Up front in the planning, though, what you can do is you can show the proposed work versus their availability. So we've requested that they're available this much of time, and you can see down in the bottom that there's a heat map that allows you to easily see if people are over-allocated or under-allocated between all these different projects that I selected here. So if we go forward with all these proposed projects, we're not going to have enough resources to for instance, Ed's going to be overbooked, Adam Barr is going to be overbooked, so on and so forth. So you can look through here. So what you can do then to resolve these allocations is you can say, well, what if we just didn't do some of these projects right now? New product development looks like it has a lot of work on it. What if we uncheck new product development, and it'll refresh the grid down below, and it's going to show us the difference. So some of the red went away, but we still have some red. Maybe we have to do new product development. Maybe that's a priority project. That's not an option to just not do. Well, maybe we can just move it out some. So you can actually click on one of these rows, drag it over to the right, and we're going to move it out, say, 6 months or so. And then all of the numbers will move across, and it'll update the grid down below, and we're going to see our new allocation here. I had negotiations on, so it doesn't let me actually make those changes when negotiations are on because they've already been committed to. But then you can also do other things at the actual detail row. I can come down here and say, well, I'm asking for a project manager here. What if I just move out that project manager role? So I can do the same thing there, and it's going to update my grid down below. So you can actually move out actual assignments of people, not the whole project. So you can play around with this and get it the way you want it, solve all of your allocation issues here. And then you can, if you don't get it all done right now, you can actually save this as a scenario, and then you can come back to it later and open up your scenario and keep working on it until you get it the way you want it. Once you get it the way you want it, you can from here hit Edit Resource Plan, and it's going to open up that same tool that we looked at earlier and allow you to actually make those changes. Because everything you do here is just what if. You're not actually making the changes. You would then open up your resource plan once you got the scenario the way you want it, and make whatever changes necessary. Maybe you needed to make, reassign some people to certain things, get some more resources involved, whatever it may be. You can also export these out to Excel for viewing and reporting on, and you can print these, as well as we have lots of other reports that we'll look at later to see this data. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. So one thing I also wanted to show was from a resource manager perspective, I can go into resources. And instead of looking at, say resources for 10 different projects, I can look at resources for my department once again, but I can use the resource analyzer. So I could switch to my by department view or by role view or whatever I want to do. I can select all my resources for my department, and then I can open up the resource analyzer from here, and it's going to open up the same tool, except for it's going to open up all of the different things that, all of the people in the software development department are assigned to. So it's just a little bit different way of opening up the tool. It would make more sense for a resource manager to do it this way, because they don't care about projects so much, they care about their resources, right? All right. So the next thing here is the resource grid, and we've actually already looked at that and we just didn't know it, but this here is the resource grid. I might have mentioned that. But there's some cool things you can do right from the resource grid as well. For instance, there's a find resource option here. I can actually send notifications to resource from here as well. So Adam Barr, I'm thinking about assigning him to something. I can send them a notification from right here. I can view their profile. So there's some different tools built in right to this resource grid to really allow a resource manager not to have to go anywhere else. You want to view reports from here. There's some different reports that you can view from here, additional reports and so on and so forth. So it makes kind of a nice resource portal for them to come into and manage their resources and do what they need to do. We talked about negotiations, but I just wanted to make sure that that was all clear. So the negotiation was really from the project manager requests the resources, then the resource manager comes into this resource tabs, they approve them, and there's this back and forth. And it can be more complicated than that if the resource manager comes in and says, hey, you can't use Adam Bar for this, I'm going to propose another resource. Then a notification goes back to the project manager and they say, hey, I need a different resource because they don't have the right skill set, right? This process can go back and forth many different times if needed. And so it can be a complicated, consuming process, but it doesn't have to be as well. You could just have it so your project managers put in what they need, and that's that done. The next thing then is that's all of your planned work. This is what we plan that we're going to do, but we haven't actually talked about actual assigned work yet, right? We said we're going to need so-and-so for this amount of time, but we haven't assigned them any tasks yet, right? We might say we need one developer, but there might be 20 tasks there. So I'm not going to go too much into how to, create the tasks themselves, but basically, you would then go to your project, you would highlight your project, you would hit edit plan, you'd build out your project schedule, using those resources that you asked for, and you would assign them, task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, whatever it may be. Those 5 tasks that you assign them hopefully add up to the amount of work that you requested, or possibly less, but it may be less, it may be more, right? So then there's a need in the system, once the work's actually assigned, now are those people actually over-allocated or under-allocated, or are they good? Are they, was the original estimate correct? So there's lots of different things you can do around that. One thing is then you can open up the resource analyzer like we did before, that same tool, and you can compare the actual scheduled work. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this up right here. I'm going to open it up for a few different projects. I'll open up my resource analyzer. And instead of looking at, the amount of work available for a resource compared to the amount of work that we're asking for, there's buttons up in the top here to show scheduled work or to show timesheet actuals. So, after we've assigned the task, we might want to compare the scheduled work to our proposed or committed work that we put into our resource plan. So we're looking at a little bit different information now down here. So we can say, okay, well, we asked for them for 1 full FTE, but we only scheduled them for half an FTE's worth of work. What's going on there? So they actually have all this availability. We need to get them on, working on other tasks. We want to make sure that we utilize them as much as possible. Or the opposite, now they're over-allocated. We need to get another resource involved to help them out. So you can, do some what-if scenarios and resolve those issues from within here. As well as there's another tool. I'm going to jump back to my resource section, so back more as a resource manager. If I want to look at assigned work within the system, so people get assigned to tasks and issues and backlog items and service requests, and all of that wasn't always going to be thought of when you're doing your original planning. People can get really over-allocated, and you want to help them and solve those issues, as well as if they're too far under-allocated, you want to give them some more work as well. So what you can do is going to go ahead and switch back to my resources by department view. I'm the resource manager for the project office. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is there's another tool in here called the assignment planner. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the assignment planner button. And it's going to open up my assignment planner, and like I said, this is going to show me all of the scheduled work, all the tasks, all the issues, all the backlog items, whatever it may be, for the resources that I selected. So you can see down here, it's a similar look and feel. You can see that I have some red here on Steve Masters. So in these areas, we originally budgeted him to work a certain amount, but he's working over that. And you can see in other places, like for instance here, he only has 4 hours of work instead of 8, so he's under allocated here. So you can start to see where some problems are existing, and then you can work on solving those problems. So I'm going to go ahead and expand Steve, and this shows me now all the different tasks he's working on. There's an issue in here. If he was working on any other types of work, that would show up here as well. And I can start to actually drag and drop these tasks around, or reassign them. I can edit tasks from here, and I can edit an item and reassign it to maybe someone else who may be able to help with that. But if I wanted to, I could drag this task over, and I could drag this task out and stagger them a little bit more. And at this point, it's all what if. I haven't made any changes in the system yet. I might comment on this particular item. So right from here, I can hit comments, and I might say, Steve is over-allocated. He doesn't have enough time to work on this task. You're asking for a lot of work here. Can we go ahead and have someone else do it? And that'll actually send a notification back to the project manager, and it'll copy Steve on it. And then you can start to communicate and work out how we're going to resolve this. As well as you can move the task, and then you can hit the publish button. That'll actually apply the updates that you've made here, but not completely. Once again, it'll send the project manager a notification, whoever's the project manager for the particular task that you move, saying, hey, a task has been updated for the start and the finish date has been updated to this date. Are you okay with that? Go ahead and accept or not. And if they don't accept, they can comment back to you. So there's this whole back and forth process that can occur here to help make sure that everyone's working enough and not too much. So lots of different tools in here to do that. The last thing that we'll look at here is reports. So there's lots of different reports within the system. So I'm going to go to my reports tab here. We have 2 different types of resource reports within the system, right? One is the reports that look at your plan data. So all of that data that we planned originally, we want to look at that data and see where the over allocations are. We might need to print that out and take that to a meeting, whatever it may be. So we have lots of reports available to do that out of the box. And it's also fairly easy to create new reports if needed, if you have some specific requirements, some specific ways you want to look at the data. So we'll go ahead and look at some planned data reports right now. For instance, the resource capacity heat map. I'm going to go ahead and click on that and load that up. And so the difference between this and, we can see all this data within the system, and we can analyze it using the analyzer and so on and so forth. But, we may need to, like I said, put this in a PowerPoint presentation or send this to our manager or whatever it may be. So this really allows you to do that. So I can come in here, I can pick my period start and my period end. So I'll say I want to see data from May 2012 all the way to December 2012, whatever it may be. I'll go ahead and pick a department here. Why don't I go ahead and pick all of the departments? So we're going to see lots of work here. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply, and it's going to go out into the system. It's going to aggregate all of that data for me, and it's going to show me all the different departments. So it's grouping on the left here by department, and then I can start to drill in and see this a little bit more. So you can see here, for instance, I have some red over in the side here. For instance, John Wood or Adam Barr is really over-allocated in June here. So I can drill in and say, why is Adam Barr really over-allocated? So it just allows me to see the data in a little bit more, a little different way, and I can drill in, and then I can say, okay, well, it's because he's working 234 hours on Xbox DVD project, or he was planned to anyway. And then when I get the report how I want it to the right drilled in, section here, I can come up to the top left, I can hit Actions, I can hit Export, and I can export to things like PDF or Excel or Word. Lots of different options here, or I can print it out if I wanted to. There was a print option here as well. You can also set alerts here if I wanted to. So I could say when something in this data changes, so maybe when someone goes into the red, I can set an alert so that it'll notify me, hey, someone's in the red, go check the report out. And with, I think it's SQL 2012, if you're using SQL Reporting Services 2012, you can actually set it up so that it'll email you this report when that threshold is met, so that you can get an email of the report, and so you can be a little more on top of it instead of having to go in and check every once in a while to make sure that everybody was okay. It'll actually let you know when people are not okay, which is kind of a cool feature that you can take advantage of here. So that's a really cool report to look at planned work within the system. So this is all of our proposed projects, and to print those out and say, hey, we have over allocations here, here, and here. What are we going to do about it? And take that to the meeting with you. If you want to see actually assigned work and the allocation there, there's a really nice report here called Resource Work versus Capacity. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And this report allows you to select certain resources. So for instance, I may be only interested in one resource right now. I could select all. I'm just going to go ahead and select a good group here. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick a scope. So a scope is the different types of work. And it's really cool as you add apps into the system. So for instance, if you add our project backlog app, the backlog will automatically pop up in here as an option to be selected. If you add service requests, those will show up, whatever different apps that you add to the system will show up there. So I'm going to go ahead and say I only care about tasks, issues, and say backlog items. Then I can pick a period from and to. So maybe I want to see the last 5 or 6 months or whatever it may be. So I'll go back to August 1st, and then I'll go till present day up till now. Or I could look in the future if I wanted to. Then you can select units. So do I want to see this report by days, weeks, months, or years? So since I selected a large period of time, I'm going to go ahead and show it in months. If I show it in days, there's going to be lots of little lines on here, and it'll be a little harder to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And it's going to go out now, and it's going to find all of the data for all of those resources. It's going to aggregate it out of the reporting database. It's going to pull it in here, and it's going to show it to me in a very useful way. So I can see up at the top it's doing a stacked charts of the different resources color-coded each month and their allocation and if they're over or not. And then down at the bottom, if I want to drill in and actually in detail that data, I have a similar chart that we were looking at earlier. So I can come down here and I can say, okay, in December, Adam Barr is over allocated, and I can expand that, and I can see what projects he's working on. He's working on Xbox DVD. I'm going to go ahead and expand that. Why is he over allocated? What's he doing? And in December, it looks like he's spending 102 hours developing user manuals for Xbox DVD. So that's what's causing him to be over-allocated. So we need to get someone to help him develop those user manuals so that we don't have an issue there. So then once you get that report the way you want it, just like the other one, you can then export this and take this to a meeting or whatever it may be, or put it in a PowerPoint presentation and so on and so forth. There's a few other reports in here. We won't look at all of them. I encourage you, if you're interested, to come in and check them out, and talk to us. But there's definitely lots of capabilities there, as well as you can take these reports, and if they're not quite what you want, you can amend them a little bit. It's fairly easy to do that, to update them to show the data in the exact way that you want to. Maybe you want to group instead of by department, by role, or whatever it may be, or division, or something like that. But in general, from front to end, you can start by planning your resources, make sure that you have enough resources to do it. Once you have that, then you can analyze and you can say, okay, well, we have some issues here. How are we going to solve these? And you can play around and do some what-if scenarios. A resource manager can go in and check the demand using that same tool, and they can make some updates and send notifications back. Once the work's actually scheduled, you can then manage that using the assignment planner, send the notifications back and forth, and there's really this whole process here that you can go through and use to be able to effectively manage your resources and make sure you get the highest level of utilization without working them overly and having them too much over allocated. So I believe that's it for my portion here. I thank you guys all for coming out today. And Heather, did you have any closing statements? Oh, we're switching back.
Yes, I do. So Morgan, if you could switch us back over. There we go. All right, perfect. So thanks again, Matt. And thanks to everyone for joining us for today's presentation. If you would like, can you guys see my screen? Matt?
I can.
Okay,
yes.
I'm
Yes.
hoping you guys can see that. Okay, perfect. So if you'd like to learn more about EPM Live, we welcome you to visit epmlive.com. From there, you can access free trials, webinars, white papers, videos, everything you need there. If you have any questions, again, regarding today's webinar, feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information is on the screen. And then for those of you who needed the PDU information, if you look down at the bottom there, you'll see the PDU number 2750-022113. So if you just put that number into the activity number, you will find the webinar there at pmi.org. So with that, we'll say goodbye, and we'll look forward to speaking with you next time. Have a great day.